Welcome to Secrets from the Scene, a show for local musicians who want to improve their music, grow their audience, and learn about Minnesota's music scene. If you're interested in talking about all things music related and meeting interesting people from our local community, you're in the right place. Welcome to Secrets from the Scene. My name is Stephen Helvig, and I'm your host. Today's episode is going to be a good one. I've got Youa Vang, who is a writer for The Current, MSP Magazine, and also does some reporting for NPR. She has been helping musicians get press for a very, very long time, and I think this episode is going to be really interesting because Youa knows what it takes to tell a good story. And I think that's one of the most important parts of being a musician on today's social media landscape, whether it's in press or you're creating your own content for TikTok, Instagram, whatever. You need to know what story you're telling. And if you don't, it makes for a really bad piece of content or a really bad interview, as I'm sure Youa has plenty of examples of. Before we get started, I just wanted to say welcome. If this is your first time joining the podcast, thank you so much for your time. If you're a repeat listener, you're the best. You keep this thing going. Please take a second to hit like, subscribe, share this with a friend, whatever. We need that kind of stuff to keep going. So if you have a moment, please just, leave a rating or whatever. Without further ado, though, let's get into today's episode. And please welcome our guest, Youa Vang.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for making time.
Yeah.
I want to start with a better introduction of who you are than what I just did, because that was really, really brief. So tell people a little bit about your history.
Sure. And also, you said I get pressed for artists, and that's kind of big shoes to fill, and kind of this thing like, okay, now I have to do this and get it done. So my background is music business, music journalism, with no intention of ever going into that. I'd gone to school. I went to IPR for music business. I wanted to be a tour manager and just out on the road and doing all that stuff. But by the time I had graduated college, I was 31. And realized I didn't want to be doing that. I felt a little bit too old to be doing that. But during my time at IPR, I was interning for City Pages, which is a local weekly zine that is no longer around. Mm-hmm. Didn't intend to get into journalism, but then I realized it was a place for me to kind of tell stories for artists and help them tell their stories, because I did a lot of CD releases. I was assigned by my editor at the time, Andrea Swenson, who later on went to The Current. Mm-hmm. She's like, I want you to interview bands once a week, because there's so many bands that are always putting out music once a week, and we never ran out of music for those kind of things. So I was really unsure of what I was doing. And I did a lot of email interviews at first. So I just sent out like 5 questions and people would respond back to me. I met Tommy Rabine through that too. I don't remember what his project was at the time. He's always doing many things. So inadvertently just was writing about music. It eventually turned into interviewing people in person. My first big person interview was Father John Misty, and I was so unprepared for that when I first did that interview.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah. And he was just kind of blowing up at that time too. Excuse me. He was interesting to talk to. He was great. And then from there, every time I did an interview, I'd reach out to local artists to be like, I want to meet in person. That's always my goal, to do that. Mm-hmm. And, it led into writing at City Pages and then reporting for The Current. So I still do that. Once a month, we put out a scouting report, which is like new artists that are putting out music all the time too. So, it eventually evolved into this thing. I didn't create scouting report, but it's still new music that's constantly coming out. There's always new artists. And then I do have a day job too. So journalism is a portion of what I do, but I'm still passionate about it. So.
Of course. How has it changed since the days at City Pages? Obviously,
it's gotten a lot more social media active too. It's gotten a lot more media interactive. Like if you're writing, you want to have video as well. You just don't want to have one medium. It's got to be all these other platforms, because you can get it out to different platforms. So you can have it on YouTube, you can have it on this. So it's all these things mixed together into, creating stuff. And as a musician or as an artist, like you can't just have one thing anymore. It can't just be, I just want to make music. You have to have some sort of platform to get that music out. So
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think the role of, let's say, written media is in today's music scene?
I think it's so important still. I mean, it is very relevant. The role of writing is still storytelling, and it's storytelling in a different way. It's not their story in that sense. It's kind of this other story that is presented out into the public so people can understand the work that they're doing. Because when you're telling your story, it's different than when somebody else is. Because like I think about coming in here, I look at what I did this morning, all this stuff, but when you're viewing me, it's totally different. You don't have the full picture. So it's all these different levels and different layers of how you're telling your story.
Yeah, and I think that understanding that and seeing for what it is and being able to use it to your advantage of telling the story that you want told is really important. And musicians could struggle with this.
Right.
Which we talked a little bit, before this even got started. So what do you look for when you set about to do a story, to do an interview?
I'll give a story of when I was given the option to interview Jeff Daniels. I don't know if you know his work. He's an actor for sure, but also a musician too, and he's played.
I'm not familiar with his music.
Okay. I wasn't either. When he came to town, he always plays the Dakota when he comes here. He hasn't been here for a while, but I reached out to do an interview with him, and my editor came back, was like, "You're approved to interview Jeff Bridges." I'm like, wait, two different Jeffs, And Jeff Bridges won an Oscar for his role in Crazy Heart, he's a musician. And I didn't know anything about his music too. I'm just like, crap, what do I do? So what I like to do is I like to read interviews from other people to see like, how did they write it? What did they ask him? I've done interviews at Warped Tour where they have this tent in the back and you sit there, you sign up, and then people come to you and you just interview them in this tent. While you're waiting, I would listen to other people asking questions. Like one of the questions, they were young kids too. They were like probably 16, 17, writing for this blog that they created. And they're like, what's your favorite color? I'm like, don't ask that kind of question, And
Sure.
It's sound bites sometimes for those kind of things. So their purpose was different than my purpose.
Yep. So do you try to think about what the story is going to be ahead of time when you look for interviews, or are you simply looking for, hey, I heard about this group and here's this artist that people are asking about? Are you simply trying to be like, I think there's a desire for people to know who this is, or is it really more about this is an interesting story and I want to cover this?
I guess my role when I'm writing is different. Usually I'm covering an album release. Usually I'm covering, you're coming to town to play a show. So my purpose is already driven. It's already there.
It's around some sort of event.
Right. It's to promote something. And people forget that press is not your publicist. But we also have a purpose. Like we want eyeballs on our work, right? On our clicks, all that stuff. My drive when I'm interviewing somebody is already, it's there. What I love is when people go off the cuff and just tell me random stories, because I think it's so interesting, because when I write about somebody, it's probably 10% about the music and 90% about their life in the piece. Like it's, what were you doing around the time of this art or this album that you were writing? What were you thinking about when you wrote this song? What was happening in your life? And so with those kind of things, it's different. If you're looking for a certain press and you're reaching out, hey, I don't have anything to promote. Most likely, I can't write about you because that's not what I'm going to be writing about. I already have a pitch or a set piece that I have from my editor that is like, you have to reach out to these people that are doing these things. So,
okay. So it's always with the intent of some sort of promotional gig or a release of some sort.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're an interesting person, that publication might reach out to you to be like, hey, we want to do a story on you, even if there's no album coming out, even if there's not anything happening.
That would probably take a fair amount of hype for that to be warranted.
Right.
Yeah. So not something you would necessarily plan on.
Right.
And at that point, you might already have a publicist that's helping you with those situations too, anyways.
Right.
Yeah. Let's get into what an interview looks like.
Sure.
Let's say an artist has an album coming out and they're playing a big show at the Dakota or Ice House or 7th Street Entry or whatever. and they've been working with somebody, they get connected with you. You're going to do an interview. How should they prepare for this?
I think it's okay to have some sort of practice before you come to the interview. If you have a partner that or a friend that you can be like, look, I'm doing an interview. Can you practice with me? I think people find that silly, but I think it's so fun because it'll make your interview so much better. Because if you think about it, if you play a song the first time through, you're going to make mistakes. You're not going to get out everything eloquently. You're going to be like, oh, I forgot to tell that. I forgot to talk about that. And by the fifth time that you're doing it, you're like, oh, I got it.
Yeah.
I know exactly. I know the tagline that's going to be my closing story. And it's okay if you don't practice, but you should know your story well enough to be able to tell it where I'm not having to draw it out of you. There's been times where I've walked into interviews. Well, number one, I think people forget. This is just me kind of giving insider and venting at this point. But like people forget that freelancers don't get paid that much. It's not great. Number one. But number two, I don't have a company credit card too. So people like expect you to like pay for drinks, which is fine. You know, I'll treat somebody to a drink if they're coming to meet me. That's not a huge deal. But so this guy, he showed up 20 minutes late and I was like, oh my God. And then he gave me an interview that was just so bland. I'm like, I just need a little bit more from you. I need bite out of this story. I just remember after 20 minutes, I was disappointed because I'm like, okay, it's not great in my head. I'm not pulling out the story well enough. And then in the end, he ended up asking me to pay for drinks anyway. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. And I don't want to give all the blame to him in a bad interview, right? Like when I'm not getting what I want, I also realize I'm not asking the right question. Part of it though is I'd love to go prepared. He didn't give me a bio, so I don't know your backstory, you know, and there wasn't much press around him too, so I couldn't read about him.
Do you think people should send you information before an interview?
Yes.
Okay.
Give me your music. I think people forget to give me music and I'm like, I need to listen to this. I
guess I would maybe just assume that you would have it if the interview is being set up.
Sometimes, but I'll ask for it, you know, because I want to listen to it. One thing that bands forget to do or artists forget to do is I want to look at lyrics because yes, you don't always have to give out the story of what a song is about. But if I can actually listen and read what you're writing about, it helps me better trying to ask about a song. Sometimes songs are so abstract and so different from what they actually are, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to get into the meaning behind something, having lyrics or the creative process behind something, that can really lead to more interesting questions.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, all this stuff ties together with, because to me, I'm thinking, okay, well, having a very robust EPK where there was either lyrics included in something or they're linked out so that if you are going into an interview, you just simply forward an EPK and it's got everything about you that they would need and you're done. We've done episodes on how to prepare an EPK.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Do you think EPKs are still relevant?
I think that they're changing to some extent. You know, my suggestion has been have a page on your website that's got everything you need and it's just a link.
Yeah.
That way, if somebody is looking into you and wants to do something, or maybe even wants to write a piece without interviewing you, they don't have to contact you.
Right.
They have high-res images. They have links to your music. They have links to your lyrics. They have bio written in different forms, different formats. So it's going to help your chances if you have a very good EPK to get write-ups. If somebody has to work really hard to get your information, they're just not going to because they don't get paid very well and they don't have time.
Right.
And so if you basically have a really compelling story and a really interesting thing, you're making somebody else's job easier by making that content for them.
Right.
You know, they'll add their little twist maybe, but I've seen plenty of times it's just a copy paste.
Yes.
It's a copy paste to what you wrote.
Yeah.
And because it was good enough that what you wrote, then they're going to use it.
Yeah.
You just made their job easier.
So one thing that I like to share with artists about EPKs, I've been researching it too because I'm doing a presentation on this in a couple weeks. So I had to write out how to create an EPK, what goes into it, blah, 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 all these things. And a lot of artists forget that when you're sending out music pre-release, you can put a password on a link, right? Because if you're like, I don't want to put this out to the public, you have to look at an EPK that it's going to internal industry people. Website is external. And if I want to listen to your new album, I don't have to wait on you to come up with all this stuff. It's already in your EPK. It's embedded in there. And if it's new music that you don't want people to see, then put a password on the link.
And I get that.
Yeah.
Fair enough. If you have the world waiting, for your stuff, sure. But a lot of people at the local level, like, it's overkill.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Great if somebody leaks it early for you,
Right.
to some extent.
Right.
Like, awesome. That means somebody cares.
Yep.
Most of the time what we're fighting is nobody caring at all, So let's not be overprotective of this
Right.
either. Like, it's all right. But yes, if you are, and if you have good reason to need to keep this private, it's easy to set up passwords. So do that. I want to circle back before we move off of EPKs, just that if you do want to know more about EPKs and tricks and how to set stuff up and how you should structure them, check out episode 28. That's with David Ostrom. We talk all about setting up an EPK. And there's another one.
Did David say to put stage plots in there too?
Probably.
Okay.
I mean, this was a while ago when I did it.
Put a stage plot in there.
Stage plots for your EPKs. Also, we touch on it a little bit, but with Krista Valinsky's in episode 51, there's a lot of really great information about how to put your resources together when she's a publicist, so it's for her to then contact press. So all these things are connected, right? And another thing that's connected to this is, we keep talking about story, but another way we could just say that is brand. I mean, that's sort of the buzzword of today's social media is like, what is your brand? It's what's your story? What is that going to be? If you just inherently think that you existing is going to be interesting, it's probably not. You can't show up and just be this mysterious, I'm not going to say anything and everybody will find it cool. That might work if you're already really cool. Then sure. Sometimes people they look to stars and they look to these huge successful celebrities for how to act. And it's like, that may not work for you. It's a different calculation. You have to understand, you have to have a realistic view of where you're at and what this next thing is going to accomplish. If you're trying to promote your event, your album release, and you're not saying anything interesting about this event or album release or why somebody would want to be there, this press is not going to do anything for you. That's the bottom line. What has been like the most common mistake people make in an interview with you?
I think I'll go back to not knowing their story well enough.
There you go.
Give me your story. Give me a quote that I can pull from because I'm going to lead with that. I also think it's okay, and I think it's important to talk about vulnerability because when you're writing music, it's probably the innermost thing that you're displaying out into the world. And being open to sharing that story is great because that's going to give me a hook when I'm writing. People are going to be interested in that. You don't have to because it's not a therapy session and you don't need to exploit that if you don't want to. Understand that. So you're not 1 foot in, 1 foot out kind of telling a story that I'm just like, I don't know how to spin this,
How do people tell their stories more effectively?
Being genuine is important. If you feel people can relate to what you're talking about, to be like, I see myself in that too, that's how they're going to relate to you and your art a lot better. I don't know if you know Haley, used to go by Haley Bonner.
Yeah.
So
not personally, but I know who she is.
She talked a lot about vulnerability, being on stage and being like in this space where people feel like they own you. And she's like, I just am not that person they feel that they see on stage. And I don't like to hug people. I will shake your hand. And so I note that every time I see her in public, I'm like, okay, this is Haley. We're not friends, but we're colleagues and we're mutually respectful of each other. When she shared that with me, I'm like, oh, I see myself in that too. I see myself in that people kind of see you as this public figure and then they think they know you, but you're just like, that's not really who I am too. Who I put out into the public and who I am here is different things. So when she shared that with me, it really helped me understand her a lot better. And I think if people come into spaces like that, understanding who they are first before they can just spout off,
Yeah. It's okay to have your story be about you personally and the things that are important to you, that you value. Sometimes building a story around that makes a lot of sense. Sometimes the story might be built around the music. I would guess that like a typical band might think about that first, of like just talking about what the band is and what kind of music it is and the influences. But that usually makes for a pretty boring story if there's nothing else there besides this is what we sound like or this is what we aspire to.
One thing, and I hate to say this about bands too, I know everybody wants to be in the interview, but I had 6 people show up for an interview once, and I'm just like, and it kind of diluted the story.
Sure, yeah.
Because it was all just, hey, this is what we did in the van. This is what we did in the studio. I'm like, oh, okay, I need the core of the story of what's happening here. And it could be 2 to 3 people, but you have to hone it down a little bit more, you know? Think of it like in a conversation at a dinner table. You're not going to talk to everybody at the table. It's hard to, because the people at the end of the table, you can't hear what they're saying, you know?
Yeah.
And then at the end of the night, you're just like, okay, I didn't get a one-on-one connection to that one person that I really wanted to talk to.
Well, that's another point that it's kind of all going to the same idea that I'm sort of getting at with your story and thinking about your brand. It's okay, it can be about you. It could be about the music. You want to practice a little bit ahead of time and really think about it. It probably would even help to write it out a little bit. If you've spent no time thinking about what you stand for, what your brand is. Because a lot of people think like, it's just me or whatever, but you have to go beyond that to some extent, unless you're just an inherently really interesting person, I suppose. That does happen. But another episode we did earlier on, it goes way back to episode 12, but with Nerdy, who's excellent at his brand and his story. And if you follow him for any amount of time, you'll see that. Like, you really know what he's about. So we did a whole episode about that. I would encourage anybody that's confused about this to go listen and think through what that means for you. But it can be anything. But the point is if you don't consciously think about it ahead of time, of what this event or what you in general or what this release or whatever is about, and you don't have a larger connection to something with it, it's just going to come off as information I don't need.
Right.
You know? Obviously, if you already have fans and people that are interested in it, oh, it's cool that you're in that write-up. You know, it looks nice. But there's no value added, right? And the goal of these things isn't to connect with the people you were already connected to. It's to connect to new people. So what I suggest is you do some brainstorming. You had mentioned practice with a friend. I think that's a great idea. But you could do this even with like ChatGPT. You could practice with anything or anybody to brainstorm ideas about what would make this interesting.
Yeah.
And you can think about it like a TV show or any other story that you watch of like, what's interesting about this character?
Yeah.
And if the story is like, well, the character decided one day that they wanted to do this thing, and so they did it, the end. That's not interesting.
No.
That's a terrible story. We need to know, well, what made them want to do it?
Right.
And what were the struggles? What maybe almost prevented them from doing it? How did they triumph past something? And know a little bit more about the journey.
Right.
Now, sometimes it can be even more different than that, because sometimes people have brands that are tied to values or causes. They might have something to do with religion or politics or, world events of some sort. And there you go. Now you can tie it into that story of why that's meaningful and why that's of value to you. There's probably a backstory there. And, things like fundraisers and, there's more to it than just the person putting it on. There's some sort of other meaning. Sometimes your event or your release might be tied to something like that. Think through it. Usually when that's the case, it's easier. You know what the story is, because it's like, oh, we're doing it for this reason.
Right.
We have this cause. So if you don't, I think a lot of people can get stuck there, but there should be a lot. And if there's not, you need to make something up. It's okay.
Right.
You do not this is art.
Right.
You want to make up something, go for it. I mean, obviously within reason, don't do something that's going to backfire on you, but you can make something interesting out of it and tell a good story.
When you were talking there, it just reminded me. So my sister and I do art outside of my writing and both our day jobs too. She has a day job working in art community, and we do cross stitches. And I started doing these because it's so funny, because I was looking at my Facebook memories today, and today was the first day that I was at a craft show that I was at. Who is the guy that's married to Mandy Moore? I was at a Dawes show at Varsity Theater,
Okay.
and my friend Shayna Melgard, who is the manager there, she's like, you should come sell some of your stuff at these events that we do. It was created by 2 members of Mumford & Sons. And the Current sponsored it at the time at the Varsity. And Sturgill Simpson was headlining the show.
Cool.
It was the first show that I ever did. So I'm like, I don't have anything that I want to sell. And she's like, well, just come up with something. And so I started making these cross stitches. I found this community online, and I started just cross stitching weird, funny sayings into embroidery, and making this a thing. And because I was writing about music, I started posting on social media, and people like really gravitated towards it. Because I don't talk a lot about music on social media, but I make a lot of jokes. Like, it's my platform to create jokes and to always just kind of put it out to the world. So I started putting these kind of things, these kind of sound bites, jokes into this craft, this medium. And so it just kind of picked up. My sister started helping me with it because I got really busy with creating the pieces. And because people liked my humor, they gravitated towards that. And then they, as we were starting out, we were trying to find our audience, trying to figure out, and our first official show was at Bauhaus, and they did this made by hands winter craft, and we made like $500. I'm like, oh my God, we sold out almost everything. And I'm like, this is great. And, now I'll be honest, like now we do on a really, really good weekend for holidays, we make about $4,000, $5,000.
Wow.
And to me, that's successful. And it's always changing too, like we're doing installations here and there. And those things stress me out. And because there's such big scale things, but we still love doing it. I still love doing it. And then I wonder, I'm like, why do people still gravitate towards this? And I feel so fortunate to be able to do this artwork outside of all the stuff I do. And I feel, that people are still compelled to buy our stuff. And I'm like, I feel privileged to be able to say that. I feel all that. But then I'm like, why do people still like it? It's because it's my story. And it's my story rendered out into this other medium. And I'm like, why do people gravitate to your music? It's because they invest in you, and your music is rendered out into this different medium. And so like, even now I feel fortunate that I can be at a craft show. I know exactly what's going to sell. Somebody's going to walk by and be like, I like that. And that's what you should be doing with your art. Like putting stuff out that people are going to connect to, regardless if it's something they like or don't like, right? The people that aren't going to like it are going to pass it on. I also think I feel fortunate now to be able to be like, okay, if you don't like my art, I'm okay with that too. You don't need to listen to it, or you don't need to focus on that.
Yeah. Usually, and we've said this before, but on the podcast, but if you try to be for everybody, you're just not going to be for anybody.
Right.
Like a big part of making your brand or story appealing is knowing who it's not for.
Right.
And not trying to please everybody.
Right.
Because that can be a really strong signaler to the people that it is for.
Right.
It makes it more attractive of like, oh, this is so tailored to me.
Right.
And you can tell because of how they're really not even caring about pleasing anybody else but me.
Right.
And that makes it stronger.
Right.
That connection gets stronger when that happens. Can you give an example of some of these sayings that you're cross-stitching?
Sure. One of our biggest sellers is never give up on your stupid dreams. So it's in embroidery. And I think like just the dichotomy of having like this old, traditional thing, and then having these weird new sayings. The latest one I worked on, and I just finished last night, was the worm in the car from Richard Scarry. Do you remember those? Okay. And it's just this worm in car, and on the bottom it's just the lyrics of Tracy Chapman's "You got a fast car, I got a ticket to get us out of here." And then when I post on social media, I constantly think, I'm like, what can my caption be? And so my caption's going to be, "My other car's RFK Jr.'s brain." So like I'm constantly thinking like, okay, this is a thing that's encapsulated in itself, and then my caption can be connected to pop culture. It's going to get the person who's scrolling by on their Instagram to be like, that's funny. I'm going to like that. I'm going to connect to it.
Yeah. Humor is a great way to connect with people. And if that's something that fits your skill set, lean into it.
I mean, Weird Al is great at doing that kind of stuff. It's hard to be a serious musician and then be like, I'm going to instill humor in that.
Sure, but your brand and story and stuff can still use humor.
Right.
Your music doesn't have to.
No, it doesn't have to.
So they don't have to be the exact same thing.
Yes.
You can have an identity and a vibe outside of your music that doesn't have to be exactly hand in hand.
So I think in conclusion, I just think know your story well enough that you don't have to please anybody. And that's going to make a compelling story to me, you know?
Yeah. And you may not be able to figure it out right away.
No.
You know, that's why you maybe don't want to wait until you already have that interview lined up to start thinking about this. Like, work on it. Here's the thing, too, is even if you don't have an interview lined up, it's going to make the content you make better, too, because it's all kind of the same thing. How you talk about yourself is really important. And it's maybe more important now than it ever has been because of how people consume music and follow artists on social media. So it's something to start working on. All right, I want to ask you a few more random things. What about like most memorable interview?
Most memorable? I would say Michael McDonald.
Oh, cool.
Is great. I don't know if you know his work. This was right around the time that he did something with Grizzly Bear. I think he was in town promoting a show too. And he was the one that went off the cuff the most. Like he talked about this story when he was growing up. He met this actor and he was in a coffee shop and he went up to him and was so excited. And he's like, oh my God, I'm so excited. And this guy just was like, yeah, nice to meet you. I also asked him, I'm like, why do you continue to do music? And he's like, I don't feel I've written the best song I could write yet. And I'm like, oh, I love that, you know?
Yeah. The more you just tell stories and sort of get off script, the more memorable something is. Left an impression. What about most awkward? You don't have to name names or anything like that, but any good stories?
It was also a famous musician. I won't name them. They had written their own bio, which is rare for an artist at that level, and talked a lot about their breakup in the bio because it was around the album too. Because
Got it.
Artists forget that sometimes you can write a bio about themselves, but you can also write a long bio that connects into an upcoming album. So they'd written about this album. And so I asked in the interview, and I said, well, how did this play into it? And something to that effect. And when you get a big interview, you get 15 minutes with somebody. Within 5 minutes, they were like, I don't know why you're asking these questions. And I'm like, that's the bio that was provided for me, that was written by you. So it just felt awkward. But I talked to another friend about it, and they're like, oh yeah, that happened to me too in that interview. I'm like, oh God. I was like, oh no, that's really hard to...
Do you ever just scrap an interview?
No.
Like, there's nothing here I can use?
It's rare. I don't think there's been a time where I've had to scrap an interview. I'll find something. I'll write something about it, you know?
Sure. I have another sort of tactical question, and maybe, I don't know how much you'll be able to speak to this, but because I think you mentioned earlier that a lot of times your editor is assigning you like, hey, go do this thing. But the question is, what are the mistakes people are making when they reach out to get an interview?
Sure.
You know, what should they not be doing? What should they definitely be doing?
So one of the biggest mistakes that people do is not give enough lead time. They have an album release show coming out next week, right? And the week before, they're sending me an email to say, can you write about this? And I'm like, okay, well, number one, I'm a freelancer and I have a day job. Number two, most publications have between 3 to 8 week window, 3 month to 8 week window where they're already assigning out stories for the next series of stuff, right? If an album is coming out, they already know about it months ahead of time. And if it's a big album, and so they're assigning their writers to be like, okay, I need you to pitch this to cover it, because you have to do the interview, transcribe, and then write the interview and then get it to the editor. It's going to be back and forth for a little bit too. So it's not like, I can't write this in a week. You know, you're not giving me enough lead time. And then even if I write about it, how is it going to get more people in the seats at your show if it's just a week promotion? You know, you're panicking at this point. And to me, it's unprofessional, because I'm like, you're asking a lot out of me. You know, you don't understand the industry, which is fine. You don't have to, but you need to just give enough time for people to do that. What's your other question?
Just any other mistakes that people make when they reach out. So not enough
Yeah.
lead time is...
Not enough lead time. And part of it also is if I don't write about your type of music, I probably will say no. So the current covers everything. You know, they cover a lot of stuff. But let's say I write for Americana publication and you're death metal and you're just blindly emailing me. I'm like, I don't even write about this stuff. A piece of advice I want to give artists is I'm like, you want to be reading the publications you're reaching out to. Because people will email me and say, can you write about this music video I'm putting out? I'm like, well, I don't write about that, but my colleague does. So are you not paying attention to who's writing what? And that's okay if you're not. But look at the byline of who's writing about it. If they're writing about it, email them. Don't email me because I'll give you a no, you know.
Sure. Yeah. Do your research.
Yeah, do your research. And sometimes writers will be nice and say, okay, I do have this connection. I'll get it to you. But that's also not their job to do, you know. It really depends on the person too, if they're going to do that kind of stuff. If you don't have a story, I probably won't write. If you don't have an album release, I probably won't write about it because that is what I write about.
How big does the release or event need to be?
It doesn't even need to be big. That's another mistake that artists do, where they just don't email anybody. Where they're just like, oh, I'm supposed to be... People should just be paying attention to what I'm doing. I'm like, here's the thing. If you don't ever email anybody, they're not going to know who you are. I currently produce a segment for NPR where I do a song of the day. And constantly people are putting out music. And I'm just like, I didn't know about that. I would have put something out. I would have produced a segment for this. Even if you email somebody and give them enough time and they don't write about it, they will know your name.
Yeah.
Because when I was writing and when I was researching, I'd constantly see people on bills. I'm like, okay, I remember that band's name because it's interesting, it's different, or even, you know. And now some of those people are very established. So it's just like, oh, you used to play 331, you know, for free. Get me on the list type thing, you know. Even just emailing people is important. So that's a mistake that people make and they should be doing versus don't do. You know?
Yeah. Don't be afraid to promote yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a hard thing for people, but it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to send some emails.
It's okay
if you don't hear back or you get a no. Like, learn and move on.
Yeah. I would say 90% of the time, if you email somebody, you're not going to hear. But there's going to be 10% of the time that you do. But even those 90% of the time, people are going to remember your email or your name, at least, you know, to be like, oh, I've seen that. I've seen they're releasing new music again.
Sure. Yeah, and you never know what they might look into, even if it is a no,
right?
That they keep in the back of their minds. Yeah. How often are you searching for things versus it just coming in and you filtering and saying, all right, we're going to do that?
I'd say 50-50.
It is.
Yeah. I don't have as much time anymore to research and do all that stuff. I don't go to shows that much anymore, which isn't to say that there's not good music coming out. It's just my life has shifted. My priorities in my life has shifted. So when I was beginning to write, I was at shows like twice a week, you know, and I was constantly looking for new stuff. And so Andrea works for me at my day job now too. I hired her to edit our magazine. So she used to be my boss and now I'm her boss. So it's like,
retribution will
be like, yes, remember when I was your intern?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pull out this notebook, long list of grievances.
Yes.
Every day we shall correct one of these.
Right. Let me see. And actually, we don't have that working relationship like that at all. We're just very collaborative in how we work. But shoot, what was I saying with that? I totally forgot. I don't remember what I was saying with that. My life has shifted in how I consume media and consume music these days. It's because I just don't have time, you know?
Yeah.
It's interesting too. My writing has shifted from writing solely about music to just more community stuff. So I'm constantly looking in community to be like, who's kind of who's making noise, who's doing stuff that's interesting.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. And then if it seems like, oh, there's something happening, there's some buzz around this, then you can reach out and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My bread and butter though is I was working for an organization called Arts at MSP. And we had 2 stages that has performances in there. And I was able to bring in some artists that I knew from community into that space. And I love booking more than I love doing journalism because it's a different way to uplift artists and to be able to get them into spaces where people can hear them that wouldn't otherwise do that.
Yeah.
And I went to a conference and I got kind of bored at this conference. So I walked down the path and it was at Como Zoo. And there's this bridge that's just, it's the Lexington Bridge by Como Zoo. And it had like the greatest acoustics. I'm like, how fun would it be to have a performance here? So a few years ago, I applied for a grant and I got some money to pay for artists to come play in this space. And it came to fruition. And I just realized, I'm like, I love booking and I love uplifting artists more than I do writing because writing is so hard. It's so difficult. You know, like I hate writing, even though I am a journalist. If you ask any journalist, I would say 90% of them would say, I hate writing.
Really?
You know, yes, because they love the connecting part, but the writing part, it's just so painful.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Getting it out, making sure that everything is correct, making it sound insightful, you know?
On that note, what do you think the role of AI is for writing in the future?
I use AI for transcription, and it's helpful in that because I used to transcribe everything myself, and that took forever.
Yeah.
I don't know how other people are going to use it, and I don't fault them, but I also think we need to tread this careful line of not using it to write for us because we take out our souls and who we really are when we leave it to machines and to other stuff to be doing that work for us. I think it's okay to have it as tools to get you to where you need to be so you can actually do the work, right? So like transcription, taking that work away from me is so beneficial because my time is freed up to do other stuff then.
What if it learns how to write like you?
Then I don't have to write anymore. I could just go book music instead. But I'm sure other writers do not want that.
Yeah, I'm sure that. I mean, because it's obviously, you know, threatening in that regard. But just curious what conversations you've had around it because it's going to happen to some extent.
Happen.
Like that's unavoidable.
Yeah.
That's a whole, you know, at some point we should probably do an episode just on AI because it's going to affect music in a lot of the same ways too, I imagine, as it will writing. Writing is just already happening on such a large scale.
Personally, I am concerned about AI, you know, and how it's being used and all that. I think about my 11-year-old niece. If she used AI for everything that she did, she's not going to build that muscle to push herself to be like, okay, writing is hard. I'm going to be doing this. I'm just going to give it to somebody else. It's pushing past that dip that's like, okay, it's hard and I'm still going to push through. And that's that muscle, that determination that we were talking about earlier that you can't teach somebody. They have to build that in themselves.
I don't disagree. I think that it's an important skill to have, you know, somewhat developed. I don't think you need to be a great writer.
Right.
And so, you know, for me, writing is not my profession. So using a tool like that, great.
Right.
It saves me a lot of pain.
Right.
Can I write a little bit? Sure.
Right.
But am I going to be very good at it? No.
Right.
I'll be much better with a tool like that. And so, you know, I think of it as like, well, is this kind of equivalent to having a calculator on your phone? If like, I'm sure at some point somebody was arguing, no, being able to do the math in your head is important. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
At some point, because it's just, if it's that accessible.
Right.
At some point, you just go, I'll stick to basic math and everything else. I'll let something else do for me. With writing, I could see the same thing happening. I'll be able to read and write, but write well? Nah. I'll let something else do it for me.
I'll go back to what I was saying about AI. I don't feel threatened by it. I think it's okay to embrace it.
Yeah.
But I also think it's important to not let it take over to the point where it's like, oh, I don't have to do anything anymore. I don't have to have any thought.
Well, and particularly if you want to be a writer.
Right.
You know, then you need to have a unique voice and you need to be better than what a generic tool is going to do for you. You need to be able to maybe still use it, sure, but have something to say, have a perspective, have a unique style. Right. If you want to be a writer. Yeah. If you don't want to be a writer, then use the tool. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. It'll save you time and save you pain.
I feel privileged to be able to say I don't want to be a full-time writer. So maybe that's why I'm just like, whatever.
Yeah. Hey, fair.
Yeah.
I have just a few more things. We'll wrap this up. A couple quick fire things. I know you said you don't go to shows as much, but do you have a favorite that you've recently attended?
I saw Snow Patrol a few weeks ago.
Cool.
And I think I got COVID at that show.
Oh, no.
It was great. I think it's, they still put on a great show. They had a great light show. It was interesting to see their personal life kind of play into it because they had 2 band members leave recently too. So I'm just like, how does that play into your story? And then I kind of went on some Reddit boards to read what happened. They're great. And I met Gary Lightbody when I was working at the airport. They played First Ave, I think, in 2019. And it was the day after their show at First Ave. And I think they're flying out to Denver. And I see this tall Irish man. And I'm just like, oh my God. And of course, nobody, like, he's not recognizable unless you actually know him.
Yeah.
And so I like walked up to him and just kind of what I wanted to say flew out my head. And I don't usually get starstruck. But I was like, it's Gary Lightbody, you know. So that was kind of cool in connection.
That's cool. What about a favorite venue?
I'm trying to think of where I love the Fitzgerald. It's
That's a great venue.
I'm old. So I'm not old, but I don't want to stand up at shows anymore. My legs get tired.
Yeah.
Like I just want to sit. I want to enjoy this. And so the Fitz is great in that it's old style and the sound is great. State Theater is great for stuff like that too, you know?
Yeah.
I care a lot about the sound and the quality of sound.
Yeah. And theater shows can be really great for that reason. Yeah. What about a dream interview? And this could be somebody who's alive or dead.
I thought Timothée Chalamet was great. I really want to interview him. He's an actor, of course, but I really wanted to see him embrace what he was doing in that role.
In the Dylan movie,
in the Dylan movie,
yeah.
Specifically. I kind of want to. Who else is a musician? I'd love to interview Natalie Maines. I don't know if you know Dixie Chicks.
Yeah,
they go by the Chicks now. I thought their story was interesting, in that this was before like social media was huge. When they made that statement about George Bush,
and people would burn their CDs and stuff. Yeah,
stomping everything. It was interesting to see that story unfold, and then also interesting to see how that story changed the trajectory of their career too. I was in Uptown one time. This was right around the time that they were working with Dan Wilson. And I walked in and I'm like, oh my God, it's Dan Wilson. And I walked up to him and I'm like, I'm such a huge fan. And I, knew him from Semisonic too.
Of course.
He worked with them on that album where right after that they released out. So
won some big awards.
Yeah, so she would be one of my dream interviews, and she's so funny too.
Have you interviewed Dan?
I have. I interviewed him and his brother Matt Wilson. One thing that they say to me, or that they said in the interview, I think about it often because my sister and I own a business together, and we fight a lot. Like,
sure.
You said you have a younger brother, and I don't know if you guys ever do any business or any collaborative stuff together.
No, not really.
So we do, and we're so much the same, but so different too. And we have such strong opinions on how we do stuff. Even setting up craft shows together, right? We're fighting with each other. And I don't know if it was Dan or Matt that said it to me, but they're like, we've been at rehearsals before where it's like knockdown, drag out fights. And the rest of the bandmates are like, should we show up at practice tomorrow? And I think about that all the time too. I'm like, okay, even at that level, you're still having these dynamics with your siblings. I think about that a lot.
That's funny. It reminds me of something like, as you get older and you become more of an adult, the true mark of being an adult is when you don't want to stand up at shows anymore. And I totally resonate with that, by the way. But
give me my chair.
You kind of start realizing that everybody is still exactly the way that they were when they were kids.
Yeah.
It's just changed. It looks differently, but what you thought was the older, wiser generation. It's like everybody's just kind of still dealing with all the same stuff.
Yeah. Or else we shift into what our parents were. I never was like, I don't want to be like my mom or something like that. It's just, I'm in a different place in my life.
Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah,
we can wrap this up at this point. I think we've gotten a lot of really great, valuable information. But before we do, what's next for you? Are you working on anything exciting that you want to share or looking to do?
What's next for me? I'm doing merch for Molly Dean. at Ice House on May 2nd.
Okay.
My goal is always to support artists in what they do. It's not about me, and I don't really care for it to be about me. And I feel privileged to be able to say that, because had I been starting out in my career, I'd be like, okay, you got to pay attention to me and what I'm doing. And I think even then I just never cared about that. So that is, Molly's like, do you still do merch? I'm like, yeah, for people I like. So I'm doing merch for Molly in that aspect. My sister and I have craft shows happening Art World weekend that we're so excited about.
Nice.
We have installations coming up this summer too that are big. You know, I work with local musician Chris Koza too. You interviewed him.
Yep.
Chris is one of my favorite people, and he's constantly putting out new music. And I'm just like, I don't know how you continually write. I went out to Colorado in January because he was supposed to come to a show with me. We were supposed to go last May to a comedy show. Jim Jeffries, I don't know if you know that comedian.
I might.
Okay, he's from Australia and my favorite comedian ever. Okay. So like, he wasn't coming here, so I was like, Chris, can I come out to Colorado and stay with you and your wife for a little bit? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, you have to come to the show with me. You don't have to, but if you do, you have to commit to it. And Chris is always like, okay. And so leading up to it, he's like, do you think I can book a show in the morning? I'm like, I don't care, but you promise. I bought tickets to this. Yeah. Like 2 days before that show in May last year, they rescheduled to January of this year. And so I was like, oh my God, I guess just book your show then. So I ended up flying out in Colorado to Colorado in January, which is cold too. Yeah. And I spent a few days there with him, and I don't know what it is about Chris, but he's just so compelling. And when you meet him, you're like, I want to be your friend. You know, like he's funny, but not in a way where you're like, you're hilarious. Like everything you say is
He's
funny.
Very likable.
Yeah, he's so likable. And his music is so good. Like every time I hear his music, I'm just like, how did you take this thing that's so complex and render it out into music that's so good? The melody's so good, and the instrumentals are so good, and then your voice is so good too, you know? Like it's all these things together.
Yeah.
So working with him this summer too, so I'll be doing some stuff with him, being at shows with him. It's everything at once. When I say I understand what it's like to be creative, I understand that it's not just one thing. You know, you can be one thing to a certain person, but then you're also all these other things too. You know, one piece of advice that I can give to anybody, and you kind of touched on it earlier, is like when you ask an intern, have you written a song before? And they're like, no. You're just like, why not? What is stopping you? And that's what I think about all the time. I'm like, well, what's stopping you from doing this? Just go do it.
I love that. That was going to be my final question, is like, if you'd want to share a piece of advice or a secret back to the scene. Yeah. Yeah. What is stopping you? Go do it. The access is there. You know, you just have to try. And like you said earlier, 90% of the time you might get a no.
Yeah.
But you got to just keep at it.
But guess what? That no is just for now. And that doesn't mean you can't go do something else.
Yeah.
You know?
Keep refining.
Right.
Keep improving. Whether that's your art or the story, the presentation, the pitch, all of it matters. Keep working at it. And like I said before, you can check out some of these other episodes if you want to get into even more details on what that pitch might look like and what information you need to have and all that kind of stuff in episode 26 and episode 51. They're really helpful resources. Youa, you've been great today. Thank you for your time. If people want to get in contact with you or follow your work, where do you send them?
Don't contact. Just kidding. The only thing that I have out publicly is my artwork, so 3dartycrafts.com. Other stuff is just word of mouth. You'll find my email. I mean, you can email me, youa55443@gmail. I'll give that out. So if people want to send me music, I'm constantly looking for new music too. So
yeah, well, I'm sure some people will reach out. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For everybody that listened and tuned into this week's episode, thank you so much for hanging in there. If you enjoyed this, if you think this would be useful to somebody else, please share it. And again, hit subscribe and like. All that stuff really helps. We'll see you next time.